Good morning, Abby, it's Tuesday, and because I'm doing a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy themed video, guess what I get to wear again? So, this is the ultimate Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and as it says down here, I don't know if you can read it properly, this is not one massive book, but 5 novels and 1 story, meaning the first 5 books in the Hitchhiker's trilogy and a short story called Young Zaphod Plays It Safe, all written by Mr. Douglas Adams. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is a very popular sci-fi comedy story that has been told throughout the years in various different mediums, including a BBC radio show, a television show, a movie, and a 6-installment novel trilogy. You may have noticed that I said 6 installments when this anthology only has 5. That is because Mr. Adams was in the process of writing a 6th book before he sadly passed away in 2001, and a man with a first name that I do not even dare to try and pronounce was commissioned to write it instead. Unfortunately, I have not had the chance to experience this story in any of its other mediums or read the 6th novel, so this review is going to be a review of what is in this anthology and nothing else. Now that we have that cleared up, I love this book so much. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with the series, a plot synopsis. We have this man, Arthur Dent. He's very British. For the first 2 novels, that is basically his only defining character trait. He's very British, and he is about to have his house demolished to make way for a highway bypass. But Arthur is, like, laying on the ground in front of the bulldozer, like he is having none of this. Arthur is greeted by his best friend, Ford Prefect. A Ford Prefect was a very popular type of car in Great Britain at the time when this story was written. So, like, imagine if, like, in modern times we had someone running around calling themselves, like, Toyota Camry. Ford informs Arthur that he is about to have some bigger problems, as in about 12 minutes the planet Earth is going to be demolished to make way for an interstellar highway bypass in space. Can I just say how much I love the premise of this book? Because I love it a lot. So, there is this spaceship called the Heart of Gold, and on it is this thing called the Infinite Improbability Drive, and basically it makes things that are improbable or impossible just sort of happen sporadically, and, like, if you use it as a method of transport, it, like, teleports you through every point in the universe in, like, for a fraction of a second, and while it is doing that, it ends up picking Ford and Arthur up. I know that the way I'm describing the Infinite Improbability Drive probably just makes it sound like a massive coincidence generator, and on a certain level it kind of is, but A, I think that's kind of the point. B, there is a surprising amount of backstory and explanation that goes into its existence, and C, it never gets overused, so it never really feels like the author is being lazy with it. The entirety of the Heart of Gold's existence is just a giant commentary on, like, fad technology, and I love it. Like, the people who made it gave everything genuine people personalities, but, like, they messed up. So, like, Eddie, the shipboard computer, he's, like, way too enthusiastic about his job. The Doors are, like, so happy with their job that they have to, like, sigh in contentment to let you know how happy they are with their job. Marvin is a robot who's supposed to be your, like, plastic pal who's fun to play with, but they gave him so much knowledge and nothing to do with it that he just became incredibly depressed. So, naturally, he's my favorite character. And, there's this food dispenser where, like, it will, like, analyze your taste buds and your nutritional needs, and then it'll, like, send stimulus down to the taste centers of your brain to, like, see what will be well received. And after all that, it will inevitably always give you crappy tea. Do you see why I like this book yet? Anyway, I should probably stop gushing about the Heart of Gold now, because aboard it are, like, 2 actual main characters. One of them is Zaphod Beeblebrox. He used to be the president of the entire galaxy until about 5 minutes ago, when a deep impulse in the back of his brain that he didn't understand was like, hey, you should steal the Infinite Improbability Drive. And then he just, like, did it. He also has 2 heads and 3 arms. So that's a thing. Can I just say, I feel like Zaphod Beeblebrox is one place where the series screwed up phenomenally. Because, like, he's a really important character in the first 3 books. Like, half of the page length is dedicated to him with having his own side plot about trying to figure out, like, where these impulses are coming from and everything. And then he's literally nowhere to be found in the last 2 books of the series. Like, I think he's mentioned in passing by, like, the narrator, like, one time in the 4th book. But, like, otherwise, he's just, like, gone from the series. And I don't understand why, because this man is straight up comedy gold. Like, did he get killed off screen and I just didn't notice because killing your characters off screen is a stupid idea? Like, does anyone actually know what happened to Zaphod? Like, I'm genuinely curious. Where is he? What? There's also Trisha McMillan, aka Trillian, who was originally from Earth but has been living up in space with her boyfriend Zaphod Beaglebrox for the past 6 months. Trillian is really smart. I believe she has a doctorate in astrophysics, but she's also very pretty, which leads to many characters, including Zaphod, underestimating her intelligence. I know that this character sounds like a walking cliche, but keep in mind that the first book in this series was written in the late 70s, a time when many people were still trying to wrap their heads around the concept of, women being smart and doing the science. So for the time period, this is actually a really progressive character. So, we have some wacky characters, we have an even wackier setting, and we have a machine that can make literally anything happen. Hijinks ensues. Moving on to the more reviewy section, the first thing you're going to notice if you pick up these books is that they're very British. Like, very, very British. I'm not saying that as a compliment or a critique, but I will say that it was kind of weird for me, an American, reading it, because there is a plot point in one of the books that literally revolves on how British people pronounce things. So there is a second where I was like, wait, how? But what? Wait, they're British. Okay, yes, that makes sense. Another thing is that in certain moments in the first 2 books, it becomes very obvious that those 2 books are based off of a radio show. I'll give you an example. In the first book, Zaphod is experiencing this, deep internal struggle, and the way it is explained to the audience is by having Zaphod explain it to the other characters. In the 4th book, Arthur is experiencing a deep internal... I don't even know what that was, honestly. Does that count as a struggle? Anyway, it's explained to the audience by having the narrator take us into Arthur's mind and explaining what he is feeling, which is obviously much more effective. It's not all the way through the first 2 books, but there are just a couple of scenes where I'm just like, okay, this was definitely based off of a radio show. And another thing about the first 2 books is that Arthur and Trillian are so flat in them. Like, seriously, in the first 2 books, Arthur is incompetent and British, and Trillian is more competent than Arthur. And that's their characters. And then, in the 3rd book, they start, being actually interesting, and, going through character arcs, and you're just like, what, hold up, I was supposed to care about those 2? Since when? In my opinion, the 3rd book is the strongest of the series, because the first 2 have those problems that I just mentioned, and the 4th book isn't bad on its own, but it spends the majority of its time introducing this new character and, explaining her, and she's a love interest for Arthur, so it spends a lot of time setting up their relationship as well. And then very early into the 5th book, she is essentially killed. Off-screen. This essentially renders the entirety of the 4th book completely pointless, because it seemed like its main purpose was to set up Arthur and that character as a couple. And I'm sorry, but, spending so much time on her and then just killing her off-screen is such a disgrace to your readers. I don't even particularly care about this character that much, and I'm still offended. Imagine how mad I would be if I actually liked her. This was a choice better made to fulfill one of the 5th book's main themes, which is essentially just, hey, you know how we have these characters, and, yes, they've had some dark moments over the years, but, overall, they're a pretty lighthearted bunch. This is still a pretty lighthearted series. Let's make everything suck for them as much as we possibly can, for literally no reason. Arthur loses his lover, and it's implied that he was considering committing suicide over it. The company that Ford works for is overrun by a bunch of greedy corporate people, and Trillian's daughter seems to have some sort of bipolar disorder or other mental disorder that causes her to have very rapid and sometimes violent mood swings. Literally everything goes as wrong for the main characters as it possibly can, up to and including the last page of the book. It's kind of horrifying. It's not an extremely obvious tonal shift. It actually took me quite a while to catch on when I was first reading it, but once you see it, it is impossible to miss. Douglas Adams actually really hated this decision of his in retrospect, calling it the product of him having a bad year. That was the whole reason why he was writing a 6th novel, and why after he died they hired Mr. Colfer to write it. Because they felt like not having a 6th novel made would have been a disrespect to Adams' death wish. Considering that all I've done so far is give a plot synopsis of this book and then explain reasons why I don't like it, I should probably actually explain why I like this thing so much, shouldn't I? Well, for one thing, it has a wonderful sense of humor, which is very important in a comedy, and I feel like a lot of the jokes in here were written specifically for me. Arthur had jammed himself against the door to the cubicle, trying to hold it closed, but it was ill-fitting. Tiny, furry little hands were squeezing themselves through the cracks. Their fingers were ink-stained. Tiny voices chattered insanely. Arthur looked up. "Ford," he said, "there's an infinite number of monkeys outside who want to talk to us about the script for Hamlet they've worked out." To this day, that is my favorite joke from this entire series, and everyone that I have tried to explain it to has not understood it, and it makes me really, really sad. Question of the day, did you get the joke? I really hope you got the joke. It would make my day if you got the joke. Another thing that I really like about these books is that the author goes to great pains to try and thoroughly explain everyone else's worldview, including the worldview of the antagonists. Like, one thing that I really liked about the 5th book is that he actually took the time to explain the thought process of Trillian's daughter. Like, he could have just turned her into an angsty teen stereotype that nobody understands, but, like, instead, he actually explained why she feels like nobody understands her, and, like, her entire view of the world, which is super helpful, because otherwise, when her impulsiveness gets her into trouble later, it would have been like, oh, you know, crazy teenagers, but, like, because he actually explained her thought process and was able to, like, get us to garner some sympathy for her, we're genuinely invested when she gets into trouble, and we're very concerned as to what's going to happen to her. With the exception of Arthur and Trillian in the first 2 books, all of the characters in the worlds just feel so fleshed out, and that's a really good thing, because, like, one of the main themes in this story is about, like, the universe and just the pure vastness of it, and how different species and organisms and humans or whatever try to, like, cope with it. And it would feel really one-sided if he just only explained how the protagonists deal with that and not the antagonists. And overall, it's just a really great book series. I think that everyone should read it. It has some really nice thoughts about life, the universe, and everything. It's just so wonderful. It's one of the few pieces of existential fiction I've read that hasn't completely depressed me out throughout the entire thing. So, I mean, that's a good sign right there. And you should especially read it if you're a nerdy person, because I don't know about you, but I am incredibly nerdy, and this book was just a perfect storm of things that I just enjoyed, like, nonstop. Yes, it has a few issues, but I think the enjoyment value far outweighs them, because there is just so much to enjoy in these books. There's just so much. Abby, don't panic, but we have only 6 days left in this video challenge, and I have only 1 day left to school, and I will see you tomorrow.